The rain came down in sheets, bouncing violently off the asphalt like it had a grudge. A pristine white Mercedes-Benz sat dead on the shoulder of an empty road outside Denver, hazard lights blinking, a desperate, lonely pulse in the dark. Nobody answered. Hertty stood beside it under a black umbrella, phone pressed hard against her ear, jaw locked tight. Every rescue service, every premium roadside number programmed into her contacts. Nothing. Just hold music and rain. Then a beat-up blue truck slowed down. The man who climbed out didn't ask her name. He didn't pause to study her face, the face that had stared back from the cover of Forbes 3 times running. He just grabbed a flashlight from the cab, popped the hood without ceremony, and went to work, drenched within seconds. Grease-stained hands moving with quiet, practiced certainty while lightning split the sky somewhere over the Rockies. When he stood up, she held out cash. Real money, the kind that ends arguments. He shook his head and named a figure so reasonable it felt almost like an insult. That was the moment Hertty couldn't explain. Not then, standing in the downpour beside her rescued car. Not in the weeks that quietly followed. Because just before the beat-up blue truck pulled back onto the empty road, she heard herself say the words clearly, without strategy, without calculation, without a single thought about what they would cost her. "I want to see you again." She meant every word. He had absolutely no idea what those 6 words were about to do to both their lives. Victor's alarm went off at 5:15. He didn't need it. He was already awake, lying on his back in the dark. Running numbers he'd already run 3 times before midnight. The bank's quarterly review was in 22 days. His current revenue covered the interest. It did not cover the principal, and the loan officer, a careful, soft-spoken man named Gerald Potts, had used the phrase cause for concern twice in their last call. Gerald Potts did not repeat himself casually. Victor made coffee, packed Chloe's lunch, and was under a Silverado's chassis by 6:45. Smith Automotive occupied a 2-bay garage off Colfax Avenue that smelled permanently of motor oil and old rubber. Victor had leased it 4 years ago with savings, stubbornness, and a handshake loan from his Uncle Ray. At its best, it ran lean but honest. Lately, a national chain called Autoprime had opened 2 locations within 3 miles, offering digital diagnostics, loyalty apps, and waiting rooms with espresso machines. Victor's waiting area had a plastic chair and a water cooler that hummed too loud. His regulars were loyal. There just weren't enough of them. He worked 16-hour days without complaint because complaining changed nothing and the work still needed doing. Every receipt, every invoice, every carefully maintained index card in his battered Rolodex represented a promise he intended to keep. His name was on the sign above the door, and that sign was visible from the street, and that meant something. At 3:15, he wiped his hands and drove to Chloe's school. She ran out in a yellow raincoat, backpack bouncing, and climbed into the truck with a detailed, breathless account of something her friend Maya had said at lunch. Victor listened to every word. The numbers could wait 10 minutes. She came back on a Tuesday. Victor was midway through a brake job when the white Mercedes rolled quietly into the lot. He recognized it before he recognized her. The particular shade of pearl white, the way it sat low and deliberate on the asphalt. He straightened up, wiped his hands, and waited. Hertty stepped out in a charcoal blazer and dark slacks, heels traded for flat shoes this time, and told him the steering felt slightly loose on the left side. Victor test drove it around the block twice. The steering was fine. He told her so without ceremony. She nodded, sat down in the plastic chair beside the water cooler, and didn't leave for 2 hours. He didn't push her out. He didn't perform for her either. He just went back to work, and she sat there with her phone face down on her knee, which, he would later learn, was not a thing Hertty Caldwell did anywhere else on earth. She came back Thursday with a noise she described as a faint rattle near the dashboard. Victor found a loose trim clip in 4 minutes, fixed it in 2, and charged her nothing. She stayed for 90 minutes. By the following week, it was simply a pattern, unspoken and unannounced. She would arrive mid-morning, sometimes with 2 coffees from the place down the street, set one on his toolbox without comment, and settle into that plastic chair like it was the most natural thing in the world. The garage filled with the ordinary sounds of work, the clank of sockets, the hiss of the compressor, a classic rock station bleeding through a paint-speckled radio. Nobody in that garage wanted anything from her. For a woman who ran a company of 11,000 people, that was not a small thing. She was beginning to understand nearly everything. The photograph ran on a Wednesday morning. Victor saw it first on his phone, sent by 3 different clients within the same hour. The image was grainy, taken from across the street with a long lens. Hertty stepping out of the white Mercedes in front of the garage, a coffee cup in each hand, completely unaware. The timestamp buried in the article was 11 days old. Someone had been watching. Someone had been waiting. The headline read, "Hertty Caldwell's Mystery Mechanic, the man quietly getting close to Denver's most powerful woman." The piece was thin on facts and generous with implication. It described Victor as the operator of a financially distressed independent garage, and framed his repeated contact with Hertty as something deliberate, a working-class man positioning himself inside the orbit of a billionaire. There was a second photograph, taken through the open bay door, showing Hertty in the plastic chair while Victor worked the Silverado behind her. The caption underneath read, "Sources confirm a pattern of private visits." His phone ran warm all morning. 2 regulars called before noon. One asked careful questions. The other didn't bother with questions at all. He simply canceled his Friday appointment in a text message containing no explanation and did not respond when Victor followed up. By mid-afternoon, the article had circulated through 2 neighborhood groups online, gathering comments that said what people always say when a story confirms what they already wanted to believe. Victor read every word of it once, methodically, the way he diagnosed an engine, looking for what was real versus what only sounded true. His name appeared once in the final paragraph, spelled wrong. He thought about Gerald Potts. He thought about the loan review. He thought about the sign above his door with his name on it. Then he set the phone face down and didn't pick it up again until morning. By Friday, 3 more clients had quietly disappeared. No confrontations, no explanations, just appointments that didn't get rescheduled and calls that went to voicemail. Victor tracked each one in his ledger with the same steady hand he used for everything, but the column of canceled work told a story Gerald Potts would not need to read twice. The quarterly review was now 15 days away. He kept his head down and worked. On Friday afternoon, Chloe climbed into the truck without her usual running commentary. She sat with her backpack on her lap and her face turned toward the passenger window, watching the streets pass. Victor let the silence breathe for 2 blocks before he asked. Came out in pieces, the way things do with 8-year-olds. A boy named Derek had shown her something on a tablet at lunch, a headline with her father's name misspelled in it, and had asked in front of the whole table whether her dad was famous for chasing rich ladies. Chloe had told him he was wrong. Derek had laughed. 2 other kids had laughed with him. She didn't cry until they pulled into the driveway. Victor held her in the front seat for a long time, her yellow raincoat bunched between them, saying the quiet, true things that fathers say when the world has been unkind and explanations feel insufficient. He got her inside, made dinner, read her the chapter she asked for twice, and sat beside her bed until her breathing steadied into sleep. Then he went to the kitchen, picked up his phone and dialed. Hertty answered on the second ring. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't assign blame. He simply told her about the boy named Derek and his daughter's face on the drive home. Then he waited for her to say something. He called her at 8 on Saturday morning and asked her to come by the garage. Not during business hours. Before. Just the two of them, no appointment pretense, no coffee cups. She arrived at 8:40 in a plain gray jacket, the Mercedes quiet in the empty lot, and Victor was already standing outside the bay door with his hands in his pockets. The morning was cool and cloudless. Whatever the week had been, Saturday didn't know about it yet. He didn't make her wait for it. He told her clearly and without decoration that he had thought it through carefully and that this, whatever shape it had taken over the past weeks, needed to stop. Not because of the article. Not because of the clients who had quietly vanished from his ledger. Because of Chloe, who was 8 years old and had cried in the front seat of his truck over something a boy named Derek said at lunch, and who deserved a father whose choices didn't follow her into the cafeteria. Hertty listened without interrupting. That was something he'd noticed about her early. She listened the way most people forgot to. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, looking past him at the open bay, at the plastic chair beside the water cooler, at the paint-speckled radio on the shelf. Something moved across her expression that she didn't try to hide and didn't try to explain. She said she understood. She said she respected it completely. Then, almost to herself, she said the garage was the only place she'd been in 3 years where nobody needed anything from her, where she could just sit and exist without it meaning something. Victor nodded slowly. She got back in the Mercedes and pulled out of the lot without looking back. He watched until she was gone, then went inside and got to work. The letter from the bank arrived Monday. Victor read it standing at the workbench, still in his jacket. Gerald Potts had signed it personally, which meant it wasn't a form letter, which meant it was worse than a form letter. The language was measured and professional and completely clear. Given the current revenue trajectory and the outstanding principal balance, the bank was formally requesting full repayment or a demonstrable recovery plan within 10 business days. Failure to satisfy either condition would trigger a default review. 10 days. Victor set the letter down, picked up a wrench, and went back to work because there was nothing else to do and because standing still had never once solved anything. 40 miles across the city, in a 42nd floor boardroom with a view of the Rockies that nobody in the room was looking at, Arthur Vance was doing something he had been quietly preparing for 3 months. He was a precise, patient man who wore his ambition the way other men wore good watches. Understated, always visible to those who knew what to look for. He had laid the groundwork carefully. The scandal had simply accelerated his timeline. He presented the motion to the board that same Monday morning. A leadership restructuring vote, framed around operational stability and investor confidence. The mystery mechanic story, he used the phrase twice, with deliberate neutrality, represented, he suggested, a pattern of distraction incompatible with the demands of guiding a company of Hertty's scale through its next growth phase. The vote was scheduled for 10 days out. For board members seconded it without hesitation. Hertty sat at the head of the table and let him finish. She didn't argue. She didn't react. She counted the faces that had seconded, filed each one carefully away, and began building her response before she left the parking garage. Victor pulled the Rolodex out of the bottom drawer on Tuesday morning. It was a battered thing, held together with a rubber band, stuffed with index cards in his own handwriting. Names, numbers, notes in the margins. Prefers morning appointments. Always tips. referred by Ray. Fixed his alternator free when he lost his job, 2019. For years of small transactions and quiet gestures, every one of them documented in pencil because Victor believed that a man's professional history was worth keeping legible. He started calling at 7:15 and didn't stop until the light through the bay window went orange. He wasn't proud about it. He called people he hadn't spoken to in 2 years and told them plainly that he was fighting to keep the shop open and that he would appreciate their business. Some didn't answer. Some answered and said they'd think about it. A handful said they'd be in by the end of the week, and Victor wrote each name in his ledger like a small act of faith. On Wednesday, a woman named Patricia, a retired teacher whose sedan Victor had once patched up for cost after her wallet was stolen, posted something in the neighborhood Facebook group. She'd stopped by the garage and found a handwritten cardboard sign taped to the door in purple crayon. "My dad fixes cars really good. Please come." She'd photographed it with Chloe's permission and posted it without much expectation. By Thursday morning, it had been shared over 400 times. Marcus Webb called it noon. Victor had replaced his fleet van's transmission 3 years ago, charged him fairly, and finished 2 days ahead of schedule. Marcus now ran a landscaping company with 8 vehicles. He said he'd been meaning to find a new mechanic for months and that the sign had made the decision simple. He asked if Victor could start Monday. Victor said yes before he finished the sentence. Hertty sent the email at 6:15 on Thursday morning. It went to all 11,214 employees simultaneously. Every engineer, every coordinator, every facilities worker, every regional manager in every time zone the company touched. The subject line contained no corporate language, no strategic framing. Said simply, "I need you in the room." Details below. The boardroom on the 42nd floor held 40 people comfortably. By 9 o'clock, the overflow filled the atrium on the floor below, watching on a live internal feed that Hertty's communications director had set up in 90 minutes flat. Arthur Vance arrived to find every seat taken by people who didn't belong there according to any previous version of how things were done. He said nothing. There was nothing procedurally to say. Hertty had broken no rule. She had simply opened a door. She spoke for 31 minutes without notes. She laid out the proposed merger plainly, not as Vance had framed it, as a growth opportunity, but as what the financials actually showed it to be. A structured acquisition designed to dissolve her leadership, absorb the company's proprietary technology, and return value exclusively to 3 institutional investors, 2 of whom sat on her board. She named the investors. She showed the numbers. She let the silence that followed do its own work. Then she presented her 5-year plan, built over 8 months with input from department leads across every division. It was not a performance. It was a document, specific, honest, and grounded in the real operational knowledge of the people sitting in front of her. The workforce vote wasn't close. Vance left without speaking to anyone. 2 board members submitted resignations before the building cleared. Hertty stood at the window for a long time afterward, watching the city below, feeling something she hadn't felt in months settle quietly back into place. Autumn came to Denver the way it always did, without announcement, just a morning where the light was different and you reached for a jacket without thinking about it. Marcus Webb's 8 vehicles had become a standing monthly contract. 3 of the clients Victor had called from the Rolodex had returned and brought others. The ledger was not flush, but it was honest, and the bank had accepted his recovery plan with language notably warmer than Gerald Potts's previous correspondence. The sign above the bay door still had his name on it. That still meant something. He was replacing a water pump on a Tuesday morning when the white Mercedes rolled quietly into the lot. He didn't straighten up immediately. He finished the fitting, set the wrench down with care, and then stood and wiped his hands. Hertty was already out of the car, standing in the pale autumn light in dark jeans and a simple olive jacket. No blazer, no portfolio, no armor of any particular kind. She looked like someone who had recently survived something and had decided, on the other side of it, to travel lighter. She said she didn't have a car problem. He said he figured. He poured 2 coffees from the machine in the back, the same one that had always been there, the one that had never been upgraded, and handed her one without ceremony. She took the plastic chair. He leaned against the workbench. The radio played something neither of them registered. They talked for a while about nothing consequential. That was the whole point. Chloe arrived at 3:15, burst through the side door in her yellow raincoat, and stopped when she saw the visitor. She studied Hertty for a long, serious moment with the frank assessment only children permit themselves. Then she said, with complete sincerity, that Hertty looked way more regular than before. Hertty laughed. A real one, unguarded and unhurried. Victor smiled and said nothing, which was, all things considered, exactly enough. Thank you for being here. See you next time, and comment for part 2 on how their relationship will turn out. Like and subscribe to help us grow.